Sam Giordano here. Today we're going to talk about part 4 of this 5-part video tutorial on the LP Deal Analyzer tool. Today is an easy day because both of the tabs that we are discussing, the GP Alignment tab and the IRR Partition tab, are auto-inputted from the Key Inputs page. For that reason, these two tabs do not require any additional input. The information contained in these two tabs are entirely, as I stated, derived from the manual inputs that were previously placed in the Key Inputs tab. First tab we're going to go over is the GP Alignment tab. The GP Alignment tab is a summary and a completely novel tool that looks at what the dilution rate is for the limited partner in a deal based on both the waterfall structure and the general partner fees. It also looks at how the return metrics are awarded to both the limited partner and the general partner as the deal performance changes based on the NOI or net operating income growth. It is important for a deal to have what's called an alignment of interest to be fair for both parties, the limited partner and the general partners. The dilution rate is one of the more important parameters you can look at a deal to tell how much is being taken off the top on the return given to the limited partners compared to the property level returns. The dilution is based on a typical range according to the deal type and business plan, and it has been previously selected within the Key Inputs page, such as value add, opportunistic, etc. You can see where the selection is done on the Key Inputs page. And this changes the typical dilution rate that we see in the GP Alignment section. Within the GP Alignment tab, you can see a breakdown of the limited partner returns net of fees and waterfall. This is the typical returns you would see or be given at a deal, specifically in relation to the IRR or internal rate of return, equity multiple, average annual return, etc. The next two sections break down property level returns that we may not see or we may not be given this information by the general partner. These numbers are based on the metrics that are given within the investment summary that are not return based, and these are calculated using our proprietary formula. As you can see, the next section looks at the fee dilution rates, and you can see based on the property price, the total acquisition fee, disposition fee, asset management fee, and then the sum of all those fees together, and what the percent of the capital raise the fees incur. If you wanted to pay attention to one or two things on this sheet, this limited partner dilution is one of the more important metrics you can see in terms of looking at a limited partner's return and how it's affected by the fees and the waterfall structure of a deal. In this deal, you can see that the 8.91% dilution rate is outside within the target range for this value add deal. One additional feature that we discussed in a previous tutorial is that in some of the more important cells, if you highlight over it, you can see the typical dilution range in this case and some more information within the cell itself. In this case, you can see the value add range is typically in the 3 to 6%, whereas this deal falls at 8.91%, thus why the cell has turned red. The second important parameter to look at on this sheet is within the graph, where you see the crossover point between the general partner and the limited partner returns, and at what point or NOI growth this crossover point exists. In this case, the crossover point is approximately 18%. There is no hard and fast rules at where this crossover point should be, and that will vary on a deal-to-deal basis. However, in general, the crossover point further to the left is more favorable to the limited partner, whereas a crossover point further to the right of this graph is more favorable to the general partners. In order to derive these numbers, there are several assumptions that need to be taken into consideration during this analysis. And for those who wish to see a more detailed view of some of these points and analysis, you can go to the next section on the GP Alignment tab entitled High Level Pro Forma Estimate, where you see this small plus sign, and if you click on that, it will break out further analysis of where these numbers are derived from above. To minimize this section, you simply click on the bar next to it and it brings it back up if you don't want to see any of that additional detail as to where this analysis takes place. The next tab we are going to discuss is the IRR Partition tab. And this is the last section of the deal-specific vetting process or analysis. As was stated previously, the information contained within this IRR Partition tab is entirely derived from the information that was previously placed in the Key Inputs tab. Thus, this tab does not require any further manual input. The key takeaway from this tab are these two boxes that are highlighted, and these are also color-coded based on the target range that the IRR partition achieves. These are the most important numbers to pay attention to on the sheet. And in this case, we can see that the cash flow proportion of the limited partner returns is 24.1%, whereas the proportion of returns based on sale or refinance is 75.9%. In general, we prefer cash flow from operations to be greater than 20% of the returns. Thus, why this deal has turned green within those cells. In general, deals are thought to be less risky when they have a higher percentage of LP returns that are derived from cash flow versus a sale or refinance. You must keep in mind the deals that have a higher percentage of cash flow will also likely have less upside. So that's the other side of the coin. However, overall, this is an important variable you need to take into consideration depending on your risk profile and tolerance. As an example, when comparing a fairly new cash flowing, say, Class A property versus a new construction project, you will see vastly different numbers in the IRR partition. For a Class A property, you would expect a higher percentage of the returns based on cash flow. Thus, it will be a less risky deal. Conversely, with the new construction project, you will have limited cash flow up front, and in many cases for several years while the property is being constructed until later in the deal. Therefore, depending on the hold time, it is likely that a higher percentage of the deal returns will be allocated at the time of sale in the setting of a new construction project. This then makes the new construction project more risky, but often there's a higher overall upside at the end of the deal. So the limited partner needs to be compensated for that additional risk they're taking on by the less cash flow up front. Therefore, instead of expecting hypothetically an IRR in the range of 14 to 16%, some limited partners, when looking at new construction deals, would prefer an IRR over 20%. And these are just general numbers, but just to illustrate the point as to how risk should be compensated. If you see a new construction deal that offers the same IRR that you would achieve with a value add deal, then obviously that risk is not being compensated, and that would make that new construction deal less desirable. This is the end of part 4 of our video tutorial on the LP Deal Analyzer. Join us on part 5, the last part of the video tutorial, next.